So, what did you have questions about or any problems with? This was the other students. You asked something about protocol deviations
Right. Right.
and how they, when is it a review still? Are you clear on that?
Yeah, IRB reportable, and then yeah, I think I'm clear on that. I mean, you could still shed more light on it. I don't mind.
We can go back to that, but we'll probably end up coming back to it anyways,
Okay.
based on whatever you ask, because it's all leads back to the protocol, and then IRB submission.
Right.
The only question is like when there's a deviation, the only question then becomes, is patient safety affected? Okay, patient safety. In any way, is patient safety in jeopardy? If it's yes, it goes to the IRB. If it's no, it's just a deviation without IRB reportable ramifications. Yeah. So now something like an informed consent. Right? This is a tricky one. ICF. You know how how many pages? This one I just counted. How many pages was this one?
Probably about. It was about like 15. I'm not sure.
It was 24.
24.
This was a long one.
Yeah.
Usually they're like from 16 to 25 pages, right? A few of those pages have signature places. It's not just at the end. It's usually like in the middle also. Sometimes they even have subject initials on the bottom of every page.
Right.
Was that the case on this one? I can't remember.
No, not this one. The one I did yesterday, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes the IRB requires subject signature or subject initial on the bottom of the page.
Yeah.
Right? Initials and date.
Yeah.
So today's the 16th, I think. So on the bottom of every page.
Right? The 17th.
17?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, it is. My mind is in proposals. Okay, 17th, initials and date. Sometimes the IRB requires it. Okay, and there's nothing you can do. If the IRB requires it, the site has to do it.
Yeah.
If the IRB doesn't require it, right, and the site SOPs do not mention anything about initial and dating every page, then they don't have to do that. Now, if the site's SOPs does mention it, and they're not doing it, okay. So let's say there's no initials and the IRB requires the initials on every page. And let's say on page 6 of 25, subject forgot.
But it's not in the protocol. But it's not specified in the protocol.
Right, that won't be. That won't be in the protocol. However, it's implied because the GCP, the protocol states that all aspects of GCP will be adhered to.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a deviation. Right? Now, is it IRB reportable deviation?
No.
This is where it gets.
Based on what we said as how much it affects, the subject's safety. I wouldn't say that affects their safety.
So most sponsors are conflicted about this. I've seen it both ways.
Okay.
But you can argue either case.
Right.
You can argue that it does impact patient safety because maybe there was something written on that page that is pertaining to them as far as like potential side effect that they're not comfortable with. And then by not initialing, they're essentially acknowledging it wasn't reviewed, even though it might have been. Right? Now sometimes it's just inadvertent. The initials don't get put on the consent form. But even then, inadvertent or not, it's definitely a protocol deviation. Alright?
Yeah.
But the question of the IRB, is it IRB reportable? Another argument for why it should be IRB reportable is because the IRB is the one that approves the consent form. So it's like directly related to the IRB. This form is directly related to the IRB. That's another argument. Now there's arguments against it. If subject inadvertently does not initial, it doesn't mean they were not explained the entire informed consent because they signed the informed consent, that they agreed, right? That could be the PI and the site's argument. You want to avoid IRB submissions or IRB protocol deviations because if you do too many, the IRB can actually, they can audit the site, and if they find that the site is not adhering to patient safety properly, they can freeze, halt enrollment at the site. So obviously it's in the sponsor's best interest not to send things to the IRB unless they absolutely have to. But in my opinion, this ICF error should be sent to the IRB. Okay, and the question is now, is it a protocol deviation or is it just a GCP violation? Or is it both? And that's when you got to look in the protocol and see if they mention anything about the informed consent. Chances are they do. Every protocol is going to say, here's the order of assessments at screening. Every protocol, matter of fact, we should look at it, but every protocol will list that. If nothing else, they will have it there as an assessment, mandatory. So if you're not doing the ICF assessment properly, technically, it's protocol deviation.
Yeah.
And then you can argue IRB reportable or not. But there's a lot of gray areas like that, like I was explaining to you earlier about the window, visit window.
Right.
So what if the patient is out of window, but they were given extra medication, so they didn't miss any dose, right? But they're still out of window according to the protocol. So that's a protocol deviation. Is that IRB reportable?
Oh, I would say in that case, yes.
See, in that case, I would say no. Again, depends on the indication. If what's the rationale for that visit window? Okay, usually it's to collect IP and to redispense IP and to collect some assessment skills, right? Vitals. But if those vitals are not, because just because you're out of window doesn't mean you won't have those vital signs done at a future visit, right? This is another one you can argue both ways. Mm-hmm. And again, the theme is it involve patient safety at all? And if you can argue yes or no, that's your argument. Ultimately, it's the sponsor's decision. And like I said, they're trying to limit the amount of protocol deviations that go to the IRB.
Yeah.
Because they happen, and you're supposed to, especially when it directly involves patient safety. But it's better not to have so many of them, especially from one site, because the IRB could audit that site, could stop enrollment, right? So when in doubt, as a CRA, you need to put it in your report. Definitely, like the more detail you write in those comments, the better. Put it in, and you could put something like at the end, sponsor to follow up with CRA on whether this is IRB reportable or not. You can even go as far as putting your recommendations. CRA recommends, as per his past experiences, that this should not be in similar situations. However, sponsor to confirm. Okay, so you still want to put in your report. You don't have to have an answer, but it's there, and you're letting the sponsor know that it happened. Right? Now, something like this, let's say the site, let's say the site did this for 2 subjects that you monitored, not just one. Let's say this happened for 2 subjects in a row, or maybe not in a row, just 2 subjects. Let's say there was 4 subjects. You reviewed the ICF, and 2 of them were missing initials on different pages. What do you do as a CRA in this case? Because it's not just a one-time. This doesn't appear to be just a one-time issue. It's could be a deeper root cause for this, right? What would you do? You have the power to do this.
Well, I definitely would, report this, put it in my report, speak to my supervisor about
Definitely
this.
put in your report. Yeah. And all the stuff we still talked about would still apply. Is the CRB reportable? All that stuff is still correct.
Yeah.
But now you have another issue. It's no longer just one event. It's 2. And if you don't do anything, I mean, at this rate, it's going to be 2 more.
More, yeah.
Right? Maybe. And it's definitely not good.
No, you're right.
Especially if the sponsor says, yes, they are IRB reportable. So what do you do as a CRA? This could be an interview question, too.
Yeah,
A good one. A good one. We can see who knows their stuff from these kind of questions.
Well, this is definitely one, the site definitely needs retraining.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be retrained on the whole protocol.
Yep.
So they know.
You hit it right on the head. So, retraining. Okay? Now, you don't need to retrain on the whole protocol, though. You got it right. Mostly right. But you don't, like, if this happened, I wouldn't do a protocol training.
Just for
I would do,
consent?
yeah, I would do specifically, I would write on the training form, informed consent procedures. And then I would have the site do a training on their own SOPs. Because you can't train the site on their SOPs. They have to do it. But you can train them on how to collect the ICF as per what the protocol wants and what the IRB wants. Alright, so you can retrain. ICF retraining. I did this with one of my sites recently as a CRA. It's, you just explain, you guys made this mistake. I don't, if it continues to happen, I mean, I'll retrain you, but if it happens again, you have to retrain your staff, whoever's delegated to do the informed consent, right? This is where the delegation log comes in. Does everyone do this retraining?
No.
So only
those who are delegated to do that.
Who have that number or that letter that says ICF next to their name, right? So you don't want to retrain the whole team.
Yeah.
If there's only 4 people that do the ICF.
Just retrain them.
Yeah. And what if only 2 of them are there that day? And there's 4. Let's say there's 4 and only 2 of them are there to physically sign your training log.
Well, I would say maybe 2 things might happen there. I would definitely, suggest that the PI, maybe trains them on that after on the training for those who are available, or maybe the next visit. I don't know.
Okay, that's good. So it could be the PI or any other staff that was there. Because what if the PI was missing? Yeah. So let's say you trained the coordinator and a sub-I, but another coordinator and the PI were missing. So you can train whoever was there. They can then train those people later. Now you have 2 training logs. Obviously yours will be on the date you did it, theirs would be on a different date. Okay. And then if it continues to occur, even if you do the trainings, and this keeps being an issue, right? Let's say next time you go, instead of 2, they improved a little bit, it's only 1 now. And let's say there was 5 new consent forms, and only 1 now was missing. It's still an issue because it doesn't seem like the training solved the problem.
Yeah.
Right? So what do you recommend at that point? You can't tell them what to do, but you can recommend in your report, and the sponsor will have them most likely do it.
Well, definitely the PI now, that's where PI oversight will have to come in here.
Correct.
We'll have to take a look at that. Yeah.
And you can now look into their SOPs. Maybe they need to modify them.
Yeah, you're right.
Or you can recommend I think Shanae went over this with you guys, huh? CAPA plan?
CAPA.
Did she?
Yeah. She had said something, yeah.
This is when issues like this continuously occur. Okay. Corrective action, preventative action. But you don't do that as a CRA, the site does it. You can recommend they do it in your report, and most likely the sponsor will agree with you. And then it becomes between the sponsor and the site for the CAPA plan. Usually it's the project manager that oversees, and they have to approve the CAPA plan that the site submits. And usually if it gets to this point, the site will be put on a screening hold by the sponsor until they get their CAPA plan approved. My sites have been put on screening holds a few times for different issues. So I've written many CAPAs, unfortunately.
Corrective action, preventative.
Corrective action, preventative action. Okay. And by the way, this is used in every industry, not just research.
Okay.
This is used in the military. It's used in banking. I mean, it's CAPA plans. Project management, definitely. In almost any industry. I think it stems from the Six Sigma approach of reducing errors. Like factories, assembly lines, they use this too. Okay. Though in those places, I mean, they can afford errors. Just like here. It's no different. Just because one is making a product, the other one's a service. It's still no difference, right? So, corrective action, preventative action. Now, luckily, as a CRA, you don't need to do much with that, because at that point it will be your project manager's responsibility and the site's responsibility. They may ask you to get involved and help with on their end, not on the site side, but on. And sometimes the coordinator may even ask you. Maybe they don't know how to do it, and they'll say, "Hey, how do I do this CAPA plan?" And you can kind of help them out, even though you're not really. That's not your responsibility, but you can give them guidance. It could be like a 1-2 page document explaining the problem. You know, what's the problem? Problem is subjects frequently miss initials on informed consent pages. That's identifying the problem. What's the corrective action? Meaning, how do you correct these immediate missing initials? So the subject at his or her next visit will come in and sign an initial at that date as a late entry, and coordinator will put a note to file on top of each missing initial in case an auditor ever looks. They see a note to file why it was signed late, as well as a copy of this corrective action, preventative action plan. So that's the corrective action.
Right.
But then preventative action is, how do you prevent this in the future, right? And that's where, in a case like this, you can say, backup coordinator, I mean, there's 100 things you can say, but backup coordinator will double check after every ICF before patient
process,
leaves,
right,
if there's anything missing. Okay, that could be a preventative action. Or maybe it's PI will now attend every ICF signing with coordinator. Okay, because maybe the issue was the PI was not there, which is okay, but maybe the coordinator was doing it and the PI only signed it later. Right? So maybe now the new preventative action is PI will join the coordinator. It could be anything. Maybe sub-by.
Right.
I don't know. And there's no real rules, but the sponsor has to approve the CAPA plan. So if they don't like what the preventative action is, they will not approve it. And they will tell the site, no, you have to change it. We won't approve that. and so then they go back, and this whole time they're on a screening hold. So the site's not making money. They can't enroll patients. They can see the existing patients in the study.
Enroll new one.
Yeah. Now sometimes the issues are so drastic, like so absurd, that the sponsor not only puts them on a screening hold, but tells them that all subjects need to come for early term visit. That site will never work with that sponsor again or CRO again. That's never happened to any of my sites, but I've heard it happening to others. I've been put on many screening holds, but never were we told, hey, all subjects early term, unless it's a study-wide decision. I've been in that situation where the sponsor says, we're not liking the data, or
so it's not necessarily the site; it's probably maybe the IP
right.
or something else.
Right, maybe there's just too many AEs of a certain type, and the IRB is saying, hey, stop the study.
Okay.
I've been in that, but like for cause to just your site to be singled out, never. And then you have to do something really bad. Like really bad.
I have a question, Dan. So what happens in a situation where normally there's a window for screening subjects, and say you're one of the major subject recruitment centers.
You're high enrollment.
Right, you're high enrollment. Yeah. So and then say you have you're not able to get the number of subjects which you anticipated. So say maybe they were expecting say 20 from that site.
Yeah.
They had like say 18.
Yeah.
But for some reason after the screening period, you were able to get maybe about 5. So what happens then? Would you screen them, or do you just stop it at what you have? So it might not be 18. It might just even be 3, for instance, or maybe you get what I mean.
So the site promised 20 subjects.
Right.
They were contracted for 20.
Right. But the period in which the screening
window,
or
the enrollment window closed already.
Closed. But then after that, they were able to get a lot of people who want to enroll for the study.
So usually, if the enrollment window has closed,
it's closed.
Yeah, because it means that the sponsor got the total number of subjects they want.
Oh, okay.
So they don't need anymore.
Oh, okay.
Like if the total study needs only 500, it doesn't matter what this site said they're gonna do, and what that site said they're gonna. If they already have their number, the sponsor, the study's gonna close. They don't need any more data.
So, but how are they gonna let the sites know? Hey, okay, based on what you have, you don't need to do more. Or
they'll send a memo to all the sites. Stop screening. Stop all screening.
Okay.
We have reached our number.
Numbers are. Right.
But sometimes they will say, if you have a subject still in screening prior to randomization, we will allow them to randomize. So they'll have a little more than.
Okay.
But sometimes they'll say, no, any subject in screening will not be randomized. So they'll send a memo.
Okay.
Usually it's any subject that is in the screening phase. If they qualify, you will be allowed to randomize.
Okay.
But the screening will be disabled by the IWRS.
Okay.
And they can actually stop it on the IWRS. So in case a site doesn't see the memo, they can't accidentally
screen. Actually get them. Okay.
Yeah, and the IWRS will be locked.
So normally
for screening.
Okay, and that's the IWRS that gives people subjects their numbers and what.
Yeah, this IWRS is to screen. So you give it's a system that gives the subject their numbers once they screen, and then it also randomize, right?
Right.
So it assigns a screening number which is in order for that site. So like if you're site 1 and you just screen subject 4, when you go in the IWRS and you register that subject, it's going to be 01-004. Okay. And another site might be 02-007. Right? That's screening. The randomization are random numbers, like 3, 7, 2, 5. And then your next one might be 4, 3, 2, 2. Right? The IWRS also will assign randomization
Randomization
numbers.
okay.
And those randomization numbers correspond to the medication bottles that we'll get.
That they get, okay.
Okay? So, or it will tell you for subject 4322, assign them kit number, whatever it is. Right? Sometimes it's the same thing though.
Okay.
Right? And so then the coordinator goes to the IP room, which you'll do with Monica tomorrow. IWRS system, there's one called Veracity. That's a big one. We could look in the papers and see which vendor it was for this. Impala is another one. I don't know if they're still around. We can actually look and see which the IWRS vendors were.
Okay.
Interactive Web Response System.
Yeah.
It used to be like when I started in 05, it was IVRS, Interactive Voice Response System, because we would call them.
But now
to
you
get
can just
the
do it
code.
all.
Yeah, they switched, like even shortly after I started, like 06, 07, everything switched to IWRS. There's still a few studies where it's IVRS, but it's rare.
So it's basically both of them do the same thing.
Yeah.
IWRS,
Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes they're referred to each other like synonyms. IVRS, IWRS.
Yeah, because I saw that a lot.
Yeah,
in
don't
the
get
module.
confused. It's
Slash.
the same thing.
Okay.
One is web, one is voice.
One is voice, okay.
And most modern IWRS
Right now.
allow voice. You can call to.
Okay.
Like if you're not near a computer but you want to randomize someone, you can do it.
Call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if there's no internet access,
Okay.
you know, it would be dumb to not screen a subject just because the Wi-Fi went out.
Went down, right.
So you can call. You
Always
can call
call
from
it.
your cell phone or anything to get
Okay.
it. Right. What else do you have a question about?
Let's see. Yeah, so I was in case I came across a place where a new sub-Is were put on, or maybe in a case where the PI, what happens there? So say the PI of a study for some reason discontinues halfway through the study.
Ah, good. And that's a good interview question too. And you know what? Yes, that's a good one. We'll get into that one. And I got another one I will read to you later. So what do you think happens if there's a new sub-I? That's actually a good topic. Like you go to monitor, and this is why I go regulatory doc binder first. Okay. Or even better, to save me more time as a CRA, I will ask the coordinator when I get in there, please bring me the reg binder and all the subject binders that I need. But also, have there been any new staff members added since my last visit? Right? And then they'll either say yes or no. Or I don't know. I'm not sure. If they say yes, then you know you have to look for, right? A couple of things. Delegation log.
Yeah.
Training log.
Training log.
GCP certificates.
Yeah.
CV.
CVs.
Medical license, maybe. If they're or whatever license they have, like if they're a nurse.
Would the 1572 be affected as well? Like, where it lists?
Good question. So maybe. If they are, it depends what this. If the sponsor wants all sub-investigators listed, usually they do. Now sometimes the sponsors want study coordinators as well added.
Okay.
All right, so you have to find out if they're a sub-investigator. Yes. So if this new person is a sub-investigator, yes, they have to go on box 6 of the 1572. If they're a study coordinator, you have to look and see if the other study coordinator was on it or not. Because if the other coordinator was not on it, chances are the sponsor doesn't want coordinators on that 1572. if you're in doubt, you can just ask your lead.
Yeah.
Your lead's here, right? But yes, 1572. So you get delegation log, training log, GCP, CV, medical license, maybe IATA if they're going to be processing labs.
Right.
And then maybe this person needs EDC access, IWRS access, maybe ECG, ERT access. That's the ECG reader, the central reader.
Okay.
It's the vendor. So maybe you have to find out what this person needs access to, and then facilitate that. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but you have to put in your report, and then because of that, it will get done, right?
Okay.
So that's for a new sub-buyer PI. Somebody texted me a question the other day, like a job interview. I'm trying to find it. They had this is a good interview question. I was saving it for you. A viewer asked, I had an interview today for an oncology position, and the question was, in a progress note, it says the patient is taking medication X for a certain condition. The PI marked it as non-clinically significant. How do you follow up, and what do you do? So you monitor. This actually happened to me when I monitored recently. Like, they almost asked me this question like the same day I was monitoring. So you're gonna go do your IMV, and especially in oncology, there's medications being added and removed all the time. Right? So you just read in the progress note of the PI, patient is now taking this medication for this condition. Okay, they marked it as non-clinically significant. How do you follow up with this? What do you do? There's a couple of things that you should do here. There's two things you should do. At least two things.
Okay.
So let's go medication, right?
Right.
I don't know what medication. They didn't put it. But they're taking X for, let's say,
Depression.
neutropenia. Okay, let's say depression. Okay. And the PI, I don't know why, but for some reason the PI in their notes wrote NCS, non-clinically significant. But they're taking meds, and there's a condition here.
Well,
so what do you check? This actually happened to me, not for depression, but it was another condition.
Well, I guess I'll have to check the protocol and see what it says about right.
Yeah.
The ComMeds.
Good.
You know.
Good. I didn't even think about that right away. So check if it's a prohibited med. And what are you going to check for as far as site documentation?
Sorry, I didn't get that. I didn't get that.
So two more things. So the site. So this is in the progress now. What do you check for?
The second thing would be.
Let's take this med. Let's say it's Zoloft. Okay.
Well, the concomitant med.
Yes. ConMed log. Is it in there?
Yeah.
Right. Chances are it's not.
It's not, since it was just added.
Since it was just added, and if it's a busy site,
probably they missed it,
or they just didn't have time
to add it. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, is it in the ConMed log? If it's not, what do you do?
Well, in that case, I'll have to verify with the what's it called, the study coordinator or the PI.
Well, you don't need to. It's already written.
So if it's,
you don't need to verify. It's written already. If it's not in the ConMed log,
well, that would probably be a query. A query should be issued. Yeah. That would be a query. I was going to say deviation. I was like, no,
No,
it's not a deviation, but a
It's
query
a
should be
deviation if it's prohibited.
if it's prohibited. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And that will require IRB reported.
Yeah.
Because that's directly, and there's no way you can argue that doesn't affect patient
Right,
safety.
it does.
But if it's not prohibited,
then that would be a query.
Query where?
In EDC.
And in the source.
In the source as well.
Yeah, and in your report. So in your report, you can say, CRA observed that Zoloft was not listed in the CONMED log. Cite to confirm if, cite to follow up and reconcile and confirm if ongoing medication or if it was just for a day or two. Even if it was just for one day,
Right.
it still needs to be reported.
Right.
Right, but if it's ongoing, it needs to be reported as well. There's another thing. So CONMED log, good. There's another log.
Give me a minute.
What is this?
Depression.
Yeah. It's a cancer study. This is a cancer study.
So, well, let me think. Okay.
What are we looking at in clinical trials? Efficacy and safety.
Yeah, so that should go into the safe. Yeah, that should go into this the safety binder.
I don't know if there's a safety binder. It goes on a log. So this is the CONMED log. There's another log. You definitely know this, but it's so much information, it's not coming to you.
Give me a minute.
It's like
let me just clear my head. I
maybe
guess.
like one of the most important things collected in a study.
So.
Any untoward medical
like
condition,
adverse event.
adverse event.
Well, in this case, would it be under the adverse event law?
Yeah,
Really?
of course. If I have a cold symptom.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was all. You know what?
Adverse
Yeah. You know what I was thinking?
AE.
I was actually thinking about the drug. Oh, yeah. That's an
And you
adverse
were
event.
probably thinking serious adverse event.
Yeah. That's
Well, maybe it is.
Mhm.
What if they took this and they went in the hospital too for depression? Now it becomes a serious adverse
AE
event,
law, yeah.
right? But if they didn't, and especially if the PI puts NCS, I don't know why they would put NCS. That's another issue. You don't think it's NCS. I would put that in my report. If they're taking a new medication that they never take before.
But what about if he put NCS and probably still maybe during his report he just put it under.
So there's a couple things, okay?
So he put it under the AE log.
Well, there's a couple things. This is why this is a good question. Like, whoever asked this person, it's an evil question. Because you can talk for like an hour about this. Alright, so let's say this was visit 5, okay? That this happened. I mean, there's more than just this note. Like, there's an AE log, adverse event.
Yeah.
But what if it's not an adverse event? What if it's part of medical history? What if this patient actually has depression? And it's allowed to be in the study,
Right.
and maybe they weren't taking medication
For it.
for a while. Is that an adverse event now, or is it medical history?
Well, in this case, I would still say it is, but
I would too. You're right. Because for some reason they weren't taking it,
taking it right.
and now they started again. So it could be an exacerbation of a prior condition.
Right.
So this is where you've got to talk to the PI about this and say, hey, does this patient have a history of depression, or is this new? Oh, they have a history? Okay, when did the last time? Because in your history, I'm looking at the patient medical history now, I don't see depression. And there's a log also for medical history. Usually it's at screening or in a separate log, and in the EDC.
Right.
Medical history, and I see hypertension, I see breast cancer, I see 2 surgeries for breast cancer, but I don't see depression. Should that be there, or is this new? And if there's no other notes in the whole chart, then you have to ask. Now, if there's notes in the chart, which there usually are in cancer studies, like a note, like a medical history will be like this. Like, you have time to read this book and do your monitoring visit. This whole thing, you're gonna read it in your during your monitoring visit, and finish all your stuff. There's no way, right? But now you got to go look through that and see if it's mentioned. Because if it is mentioned, like on page 35 of that thing, and just like a small scribbled writing in like one sentence, the coordinator has probably missed it, and they didn't put it in the med history, right?
Yeah.
So then you can add it to the med history, and it's treated differently now. It's still going to be an AE if it's an exacerbation of depression, but it's not a new condition. So when they analyze the data, like the biostatisticians and the sponsors, way above our pay grade, this depression will be treated very differently depending if it was a medical history already, or if it's a new event or a new diagnosis. It's treated differently, right? So it's very important that you catch this, because it can affect the safety profile of that drug.
So what about a situation where, for some reason, it's not on the person's history, it wasn't recorded at all,
Right.
but it's a condition, it's a pre-existing condition already?
But how would you know?
So say, like, for instance, okay, like the way you have people migrating. So say they came from
Yeah.
another country, they don't
Yeah.
have any, medical record or
Right.
medical history.
Right.
What do you do then?
Well, I would ask how the site knows this. Did the patient tell them?
No, maybe like what I'm saying is, okay, so they moved over here, so
Yeah.
for some reason they got enrolled midway through the study, then they start taking this,
Yeah.
and then maybe somewhere along the line, the patient says, oh, they've had it before, but there's no record that shows they've had it
Right.
before, or maybe
But if the patient says they had it before,
that's still a source. That's,
Yeah.
Okay.
and this is where you have to encourage the site. If there's no records of depression, you have to encourage the site to talk to the patient about this. Maybe that's something you can talk to the PI about when you meet with them. Say, hey, I noticed there was depression. It's really important that we find out if this is actually part of their medical history or a new adverse event. Sponsor would be interested in this. Can you please try to communicate with the patient or their family if they've ever had a history of depression? Maybe they were diagnosed somewhere else with depression, or maybe they just had symptoms that were undiagnosed. Can you let us know?
What about an SAE? Maybe say it was an SAE, maybe convulsion. Someone was convulsive, maybe, from these parts where they don't really have these records.
Right.
And for some reason, while they were enrolled in the study, they never knew something like that happened. But somewhere along the line, this happened, right?
And they don't have no history
Right of it.
written down, but they
Still-
do have a history.
It's still gonna be put as an SAE.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Anytime you end up in the hospitalized, it's a SAE.
Whether it's
Absolutely.
related or not.
Yeah, whether it's part of medical history or not.
Oh, okay.
Right. Like and we can even use depression. We can continue with it. So if they were suicidal, suicidal thoughts, that's a SAE.
SAE. But now in that case, especially when eventually you figure out that it's been a pre-existing condition, and maybe for some reason the IP got stopped, they had to stop the IP just to make sure. What happens?
They wouldn't do that unless there was multiple cases of that.
Cases of that, okay.
Yeah.
So they don't just stop
But
right
it's
away.
important because it's a brand new AE of depression from someone with no history of depression. So no records of that, and the family denies anything like that, and the patient denies it's ever been a symptom. Obviously now it's a new thing.
New thing. So
that's treated very differently than something that's on here.
Okay.
And then it's just exacerbated.
Right.
Because that could have been exacerbated even without the IP.
Without the IP, yeah.
Right? But in the case that it's not on the medical history, it's almost no way that this could have happened, you know, without the IP. I mean, it's very much related. And maybe it could have, but it's treated differently. Like hypertension's another one. Like if the patient had history of hypertension, but now they lost weight, so it's under control, and they stop taking the meds because they don't need it. And then sometime during the study, they increases, so they go back on the meds that they had. That's still treated a little differently than if it were a brand new thing.
Fresh. Okay.
Not from your world as a CRA or a coordinator. That's treated exactly the same. But from like a scientific aspect, it's looked at differently. Right? Okay. But that's way beyond our pay grade.
Right.
It's like biostatisticians, and that's why they need such big numbers of patients.
So they can always,
because if this happened, like depression occurs in
a large number of those patients.
Yeah. Let's say there's 500 patients in the study, okay, and like 50 of them experience this all of a sudden.
And that's an indicator.
Yeah, that's an indicator, right? And they'll know at the end of the study, like statistically significant. It's like a whole science about what's statistically significant and what's not. But that's different than what's clinically significant and what's not. Right? So it's very important to document because the drug profile can change based on the documentation. Right? Anything else? That's a lot, huh? But that's a good interview question. Would you have done good in that interview? I think you would.
I would.
Yeah. You could go in depth on that, just that little question. And that's why they ask it. Because if you say nothing or very little, they'd know that you don't understand the fundamentals. And you don't have to go as in depth as we did. They'll probably stop you. But you should at least indicate that you can go that far if you have to.
Right.
And if they see that you can, then they'll stop you because they don't want to waste time.
Right. Yeah, another one was because in some of the subject materials I saw. So what happens when a subject pulls out all of a sudden, and then because I saw there were a couple of documents that they were not signed, and I knew as a result that the subject there was an early termination of the study or something. What can you?
So the subject can withdraw consent at any time.
Right.
Okay? There's two things there. There's a withdraw consent. So the subject tells you, hey, I don't want to do the study anymore. Okay, they're allowed to. You should encourage, the sites should encourage them to find out why, and maybe it's something the site can do to change their mind. Maybe it's, maybe the subject is relying on a false premise, you know. In the case of schizophrenia, we deal with this a lot. The patients are hearing voices. So sometimes a voice tells them, hey, get out of that study, they're trying to kill you. You know, we encourage them, hey, why are you wanting to withdraw? They say, oh, because Kobe's trying to kill me. Okay, he's the coordinator. And then you say, no, you know, I can assure you he's not. I'm here, we're supervising you. Kobe's our study coordinator. If you want, we can have somebody else be your coordinator. And then the patient says, okay, you know what, that's fine, I'll continue. That's encouraging the subject.
Right.
And it could be 1,000 things.
Right.
It's just one I deal with a lot. And they're never paranoid against Kobe, but they're paranoid sometimes. We have this example now, actually. A patient came Monday here, and we have her pharmacy records. So we have like a we have medication that's typically used for this diagnosis. Only used for this diagnosis. So we can infer what the diagnosis is, but we don't have the actual diagnosis on paper. Okay, and she's afraid to get that for us. She's paranoid because she thinks that her doctor will fire her as a patient if she's in a study. Right? So, which is not true.
Right.
It's not going to happen. And she's entitled to her own records. She doesn't have, she actually signed on the consent form. There's a place where you can allow the patient's doctor to know if they're in the study or not, if they want, and they check no. Don't let my doctor know I'm in the study.
Right.
So we can't request it from the doctor. We have to have her try to get it.
Right.
And she's paranoid. So, you know, but that's not to the point where she's going to leave the study.
Right.
She can still join because we have some records. It's just not the actual diagnosis. So if a patient wants to withdraw consent, the site should encourage them to continue. If the patient still wants to withdraw consent, you can't force them, so you let them. But you encourage them to come to an early termination visit. Okay? Which, by the way, the patient can decline to.
Okay.
At the early termination visit, also known as ET or EOT, end of treatment, early term, it's the same thing. All the assessments are done with the exception of not dispensing new medication. You're just collecting the old medication back, right? Or you're doing vitals, you're doing ECG, you're doing blood draw, you're doing everything, all the assessments, right? All, like, whatever assessments they had, you're doing it again. If the patient wants to. Sometimes they don't want to. And that's okay too, but the site should document that they are trying to encourage to do this for their safety. Another thing is, let's say for example an ECG is done at this visit and it turns out to be abnormal. Okay, this is the last visit for that patient at this site. The patient should be given a copy of their ECG and told to take it to their primary care physician or lab results.
Okay.
If they're abnormal, anything's abnormal, you give the patient a copy of their lab results and say, you're being referred back to your primary care physician. And it should be documented, right?
Okay. That's
safety. Now, there's also something called loss to follow-up, where the patient just doesn't show up, right? And you still have to document 3 attempts. 3 attempts documented.
3 calls.
3 calls and a certified letter with the proof for the source.
Right.
Okay. To come in for an early term and to at least return the medication. It needs to be documented. Now, if the patient doesn't do that, it's not good, but there's nothing you can do. But if the site keeps enrolling subjects that are lost to follow-up continuously, that's not a good site, and they're probably not going to get selected next time because their patient pre-screening, they're not selecting the appropriate patients for the study. So it still reflects bad on the site. So the site doesn't want to have too many of this.
Now, is it all sites that do running periods?
No.
Not all. Some just from screening straight to baseline.
Straight to baseline, yeah. The more complicated ones have run-in.
Have run-ins just to make
sure.
The
monitor that was here today, we're in a run-in phase. It's like a 6-week run-in. The patient doesn't even randomize until like month 3.
Just so normally is there like for long term, like 2-3 years kind of studies just to make sure? Or
sometimes there's long, like 2 or 3. Yeah, phase 3 studies are. Okay. Phase 3 studies are long. They're like 1 to 3 years. Phase 3. Phase 2 are shorter. Phase 2 are like
a couple of months.
A couple months, like 2 months to a
18
year.
months, okay.
You know, and then phase 3, and sometimes phase 2 have a long-term extension. And phase 3 also have long-term extension study. Open label is also, this is referred to as open label.
Okay.
So during the study, during the main portion of the study, it's double-blind, randomized, placebo control, right? During the open label, you're guaranteed the medication for however long the open label is. But they have a new informed consent, a new SAV, Not a new SSV, site
Okay.
selection, but a new SIV for
SIV.
that study, for the extension study. Usually it's the same monitor. Usually it's the same coordinator. But new regulatory documents, everything. It's like a new study,
Okay.
right? New informed consent, everything. But it's easy. They're open label. It's usually less assessments,
Okay.
and it's just the medication, vital, safety stuff, efficacy stuff. It's not as complex. That's the extension, long-term extension study or open label portion, which this study had, if I remember. The one you looked at. Anything else you had a question about? There's a lot. And tomorrow you're going to shadow them on a visit. I think it's a schizophrenia study also. So you'll shadow Kobe, Monica. Chris is actually here to do one of the assessments. And then you'll see them filling out all the SORs. That one's actually a end of treatment visit.
Okay.
They finished the study. They're not withdrawing early. They finished. So ET
follow up
or EOT could be early term or end of treatment. It's the same visit, but it's either done when it's supposed to or it's done shorter because the patient wants to quit, right? So tomorrow we're having an early end of treatment visit. So it should be actually perfect timing for you.
Okay.
You got lucky.
I did, right?
Forget about the weather.
The weather.
You got lucky with the visit. Because it's literally what you're talking about right now. It's going to happen tomorrow. Hopefully.
So now, from this, what you said, early term and EOT, they're
same exact visit, same exact thing, like same as everything's the same, identical. It's just early term happens prematurely.
okay.
Like whenever the patient wants to quit, that's when you do
Yeah,
it.
it happens.
End of treatment is when it's supposed to happen, at the end of the study.
So like end of study, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
So this little O is like
Mm-hmm.
gonna signify what it is. You know, is it end of treatment or early term? And it could still be end of treatment for an early term, which makes it more confusing. But you have to know the protocol to know, and you have to know when they randomized and when the ET date is to know if it's an actual early term or if it's a normal end of treatment visit. And tomorrow's a normal end of treatment visit, which for a long study like this one is rare. This is like a 4-year study.
So I mean, what are the criteria?
No, 3-year study.
What's the criteria for the EOT for the early end of treatment? This, I mean, what make them, apart from not from the subject's point of view, like from the sponsors or the CROs, what might be certain criteria that might bring out an EOT?
Well, it's just the way the study was designed. Like this, it has to end at some point.
No, what I'm saying is, so if it's a 3 years, so say if it's not yet 3 years,
okay.
You know, can an EOT occur?
Yeah, early term.
So that's what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
what would be the criteria for that? What prompts that?
Oh, if a patient wants to withdraw.
So, but that couldn't you call that just early termination? Then
Yeah, it's called the same thing. I mean, they could be called this because it's still end of treatment, even
but
if
it's not
early
end of
term.
studies, basically.
Right.
Oh, okay.
But at
okay.
end of treatment, because they're
Treatment.
not gonna take the medications anymore.
Continuously. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's why it can be confusing.
Right. I was thinking EOT is almost the same like end of studies. So,
I would be confused too.
Okay.
And
But now I get it.
I think the industry is on purpose like this.
All right. I get it.
I don't know. I don't think it's on purpose, but it's confusing unnecessarily. So, and then everyone uses their own lingo, and then the sponsors name different things. So it's no wonder people are confused. But once you do it, it's kind of like IWRS, IWRS. Like
Right.
it's the same thing.
Same thing, right?
And everyone knows what you mean by either one. If you say ET, early term, end of treatment, they'll know what you're talking about. lost to follow-up, LTFE. 3 attempts and a certified letter.
Okay.
And as a CRA, you should encourage this. You should encourage like beyond this, because you should remind the site that this doesn't look good to have IP not returned. You know, especially like some of these are controlled substance drugs. Like we had an opioid study, and it's like a DEA, and they will fine you for like a missing pill.
Right.
Per pill. Like, so it's very important to collect the IP from those patients.
Subject.
And not only that, it's the site's responsibility to ensure that the patients they're enrolling reasonably meet expectations to adhere to the study. Right? So if you're enrolling and all your patients are lost to follow-up, nobody returned the meds, you're not doing a good job as a site selecting appropriate patients.
Actually, one of the documents on the module where the study coordinator actually was, I think it was selling. Was it selling?
On the warning letter?
No, it wasn't on the warning. It was actually a case. So
wow.
A lot of the warning letter, that was one of the issues too, where the PI eventually was, he was questioned and all that.
I'm not surprised.
A lot of the IP was missing, and I think it was one of those cases where it was a controlled substance. So there were indications that the study coordinator or whoever
worth a lot of money.
Right, was selling it.
Yeah, probably made more money doing that than coordinating.
I was like, wow.
It happens, and whose responsibility is that?
That's the PI.
Exactly.
The PI.
Why is she or he hiring that person?
Right.
And then if you really want, like if you were an auditor, you would say, what is your SOP for hiring staff? Let me see your SOP for hiring your coordinators. Oh, you don't have one? Well, no wonder this is happening. Or you do have one? Let's see, did you actually do this? Because if you did this, this wouldn't happen. Like a background check, for example.
Right.
You know, you get in trouble. Like no PI wants to deal with this.
I'm pretty sure that side was closed, because that's a major issue.
That is.
And the funny thing was,
that's horrible.
I know.